All right, my friends. JR Dukes at your service. Appreciate everybody being here. Come on in. I just started the cameras. Everything should be looking good. Just want to double check. I want to say hello quickly to everyone on YouTube. Hello to our friends on the X platform and our friends on Twitch. Welcome. All right. If you haven't done so already, take a minute. Go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Additionally, this is a live interactive type chat. If you choose to, you are welcome to put your comments or any type questions you have in the comment thread, whether you're on X, whether you are on YouTube, it does not matter. And I just put in the actual link. If you would like to appear via video and actually join the conversation, feel free to do so. Just simply click on that link. Easy peasy, works right off of your cell phone. Doesn't matter what type of cell phone you have. Or if you are so inclined and you don't want to appear via video, use the same link and you can simply call in without having to appear on video. So the choice is yours. Hello to American Nana. Thank you for being here. And of course, she lives out in the beautiful West Virginia, Appalachia. It is beautiful up there, especially this time of the year as all of the trees are changing colors. So we're going to jump into it pretty quickly. You got a lot to talk about tonight. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm JR Dukes. I am all about having what I call a free mind. This is the home of the free-minded patriots. We're all about ending the terrible, dreaded disease of indoctrination, and I'm all about helping you live your best life possible by understanding the world that we live in. I love talking about current events, politics, free speech, the court system, basically the people that have power over us. I like to kind of keep check on them and see exactly what they're doing and make sure you know how to deal with the police, law enforcement officers in general. I at times talk about asset protection, anything to deal with the courts or our legal system as a whole. If that interests you, this is the channel for you. Be sure to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button if you don't mind. It does help the algorithm. Without further ado, we're going to jump into it. Today, we're going to be talking about current events involving President Donald Trump, aka the Donald Trump Daily Feed. We're going to talk about what's been going on in his world. I got an interesting thing about our brother, Al Sharpton. We all know him. He's been around for many years. If you're my age or older, I know you know all about brother Al Sharpton from New York City. He's now a MSNBC host. He got caught up in something. I'm not trying to embellish it, make it like it's illegal necessarily, but very interesting. And I think it speaks to the core of all these woke Democrats. But we're going to jump into that in just a second. I also have some interesting stories pertaining to Kamala Harris and some comments that one of her friends, Omar, had to say about the Democratic Party in general. And if we have time, if time allows, I have a particular police matter, if you will, that I want to take a look at in our police blotter file. So as far as videos go today, we're going to obviously take a look at the JR Dukes feed. I got several videos that I have picked out that I think is worthy of a chat. I'd also like to touch base on what's going on in the Menendez brothers out in California. Again, if you're older like me, you remember it clearly. So I guess it's been 30, 35 years ago, back in 1996, when I think their second trial was. We're going to touch base on that and some issues on a few other programs. These woke Democrats are still reeling from their devastating loss at the hands of our favorite beloved president, Donald Trump elect. And they are none too happy about it. And you have a lot of them that are just kind of walking around, not even realizing that the war is over. We talked about the Japanese army. I think he was actually a colonel or something like this. He was at war after World War II for like 29 years. It wasn't until 1974 that they actually reached the island that he was holed up at and had to inform him that, hey, guess what? The war is over. And right now, you're having a lot of these woke Democrats that are experiencing the same type of syndrome. They still think there is a major ongoing war going on and that the election is still happening. And their words, their rhetoric, it's just never ending. They're just talking like the election is tomorrow. Oh, well, we can't necessarily help them. All we can do is try to help everyone else who might be amenable to hearing the message. Hello to Rosemarie. It's always a pleasure to have you in the chat, young lady. Thank you for being here. All right, let's take a look at our first clip that I want to take a look at. And here we go. All right. I'm going to minimize myself a little bit so you can get a better view of the screen. This story right here has to do, I want to bring up our brother Al Sharpton too next so that I have that. Okay. As you probably have heard on the news, there's a lot going on right now pertaining to the tariffs that Donald Trump has been talking a whole lot about. I personally have been reading up and educating myself on the tariffs and exactly how they have been used over time. I mean, I've been familiar with the term like many of you probably have, but I wanted to see the pros and cons. Again, I don't like taking anybody's word on anything. I'd like to do my own research, present it to you, let you make up your own mind as to whether or not these are a positive, negative things. And true to form, true to character, Donald Trump always knows the art of the deal. He is already making a huge difference out there in the world, and he's not even president of the United States. If you looked on my X platform today, which of course is simply at Reach JR Dukes, all the other platforms are at, it's just simply at JR Dukes. It is clear Donald Trump is making an enormous difference in the world and is already working hard at getting his agenda passed. Even today alone, with the threats he made against Canada and Mexico, and this is what we're going to take a look at in this article, so obvious, so clear that these people are willing to do exactly what the United States wants them to do under President Donald Trump, because, ladies and gentlemen, the world knows Donald Trump means business. He is the world leader. He knows he is, and unlike the Biden-Harris administration, he knows how to wield that power. I think it's really just that simple. Now, on one hand, we had Justin Trudeau from Canada. He, within 2 hours, was calling President Donald Trump elect and basically telling him, sir, we got you covered. We want to do business with you. Don't worry about it. We're going to help you with whatever the crisis is that you see at the border. Now, that is the mark of a true leader in Donald Trump, to have people, these other leaders, cave that quickly. On the other hand, you have the Mexican leader here. It says here on the, what this is from Fox Business. So let's go through this together. Mexico may retaliate with its own tariffs after Trump threat, the new prez says. If this prez is like any of the other presidents of Mexico, just like last time they had this type of little squabble going back and forth, it won't be a long time, folks, before they have a, let's just call it a come to Jesus moment. You're going to see that you're going to have the Mexican leaders basically say, we're going to work with you, Mr. Trump. It's really something they have to do. They know they have to do it, but it takes a president that has the cojones to do the job that needs to be done on behalf of the American people. And folks, I would argue that what is good for America, by extension, is good for the world. You cannot have a country when you have these open borders that are just porous, to put it bluntly. It has to stop. Even today, I don't know if you've seen the news, but they have caravans of people still coming across the border right now today. All right, it says Trump says Monday he will charge Mexico a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States. Again, as we're going to read here, this is if they don't help put a stop to all these drugs, fentanyl, and illegal migrants coming across the border. It says Mexican president, I'm not sure how to say her last name, we'll just call her Claudia, has clapped back at President-elect Trump's 25% proposals on imported goods from Mexico, saying she would impose tariffs of her own on the United States and suggested it could lead for a tit-for-tat trade war with the countries, as well as more inflation. Just more scare tactics, in my opinion, pertaining to the American people. Obviously, as shown by this last election, the American people are a lot smarter than these talking heads, the so-called legacy media wants you to believe. I mean, think about this. Donald Trump had such a huge, overwhelming victory, especially in the Electoral College, and that is despite that almost every single news station was against him. The coverage was constantly anti-Donald Trump. You had the courts hammering him between Jack Smith, Letitia James, You had Alvin Bragg, of course, our favorite Fani Willis, Nathan Wade. Yet Donald Trump was able to rise above it all and persevere on behalf of you and me. And I think you're going to see more of the same. This is just kind of an opening silo, if you will. And his administration has not even started for the second time around. Trump on Monday said he would issue an executive order upon taking office to change Mexico and Canada's 25 or to charge them a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States, as well as additional tariff hikes on China. Amen is all I got to say about that. Over the flow of illegal immigrants and illicit drugs. In a Truth Social post, Trump, who takes office January 20th, 2025, woohoo! Thousands of people were pouring through Mexico and Canada at levels never seen before. And we're familiar with this. We know that under the Biden-Harris administration, at a minimum, I mean, the reports do vary considerably on this. I would say conservatively, at least 12 million illegal immigrants have come into this country just since Joe Biden, Kamala Harris took office. Extremely sad, extremely troubling. I want to say real quick, hello to my friend Sapphire. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure, Sapphire. Thanks for being here and joining the conversation. And yay, God, it's always good to have you back with us. Thank you for being here. All right, it says that let me find my little place here. All right, the president's been in office for about 7 weeks. On Tuesday, warned that tariffs would cause inflation and job losses in both countries. Let's see if I can read a little easier on this. Yeah, it would cause job losses and inflation in both countries. Well, you know what? Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, we might, even if this did happen, we might have to
update your home with custom cabinets from the RTA store. And choose from over 100 styles and up to 48-month financing options.
There's
the RTA store.
Nothing can be done about
cabinetry
that.
And creating...
Let me get my mic to work correctly here. Okay, here we go. All right. Even if prices go up temporarily, so what? But they never did under Donald Trump before, as we all so very fondly remember. So I don't see any reason to think they're going to go up this next time. So, okay, back on it here. Says, and this is, remember, Mexico, Canada, Donald Trump, under his administration, was able to negotiate a very substantial trade agreement between the two countries. And I'm sure that Donald Trump wants to keep that in place. But he has to use the tools that are at his disposal. And if he doesn't use these tools, there's no way that he's going to bring about the change that he's looking for. If I'm being straight up and honest about this, sometimes you just have to use the carrot and the stick and let them make the choice as to which way they want to go. It says tariffs would cause inflation and job losses in both countries. And this is highlighted by the number of U.S. auto manufacturers based in Mexico. And remember, China has been trying to open a couple of plants in Mexico. The idea is to circumvent some of the tariffs by taking advantage of the free trade agreements between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And of course, Donald Trump is not going to tolerate that. One tariff will follow another and so on until we put our common businesses at risk. I think her name is pronounced Steinbatham, said in a letter to Trump, which she read at a press conference and plans to send later today. What sense is there in escalating cross-border tariffs, she added, underscoring that it would hit particularly hard U.S. car makers with plants in Mexico, such as General Motors and Ford. Well, General Motors specifically has plants all over the place, but they definitely have facilities in Mexico. I think the idea here, again, is not really to go forward with the tariffs, but here's the good news. Even if the tariffs go in place, you know that they're going to immediately start putting more of the work back into the United States, more jobs for Americans, more money for Americans. And I don't think it'd be that difficult. General Motors in particular, I have family members that have work and presently do work at General Motors. And all they'd have to do is basically shift some of the work that they're currently doing in Mexico, for example, and bring it home to the great United States. As Mexico represents nearly 25% of all North America vehicle production. Of course it does, because of that free trade agreement. They got cheaper labor, less regulations. Of course, that is going to be a consequence of that. It is unacceptable and would cause inflation and job losses in Mexico and the United States, per the Associated Press. If tariffs go up, who will it hurt? General Motors? That's a question mark. Again, I think it's just more of the same old scare tactics. I am not concerned about it. And there's a good picture of our favorite president, and I think he is right on track to do what needs to be done. Now, let's switch over to my friend Al Sharpton. I got to tell you all about this here. Let's see. Let me guess. Al, yeah. Well, you know he did. All right, let me preface this by telling you guys this, all right? We all know how our favorite ex-candidate for president, Kamala Harris, we all know that she raised like between, I mean, I cannot get a solid number on this, to be honest with you. It's between $1 and $2 billion. Let's just say she raised $1 billion. We also know that the campaign is in debt. There's a lot of people that have now currently went without pay. They have bills piling up. They're actively right now soliciting additional donations. Can you imagine that? I mean, I'd like to see how that conversation goes. Hey, hello. Yeah, I appreciate you donating to Kamala Harris's campaign. Oh, yeah. And it is true that we lost. We lost in a spectacular way. But listen, we still have bills. Can you go ahead and send us some more money? Who's going to sign up for that? I'm not signing up for that. That just sounds ludicrous, right? Well, we also know that some of these people that were so-called endorsers of Kamala Harris, and I'm talking about Oprah Winfrey and a lot of these rap personalities, Eminem, and some, to be honest, I don't know some of these other groups. I knew them when I saw them performing, but up until then, I never heard of some of their names. And it turns out that they all got paid a lot of money. For example, Oprah, now it's not directly to Oprah, it's kind of playing semantics, if you will, but Oprah received, her company did $1 million for the production cost of having that stage event. You and I both know something's wrong about that, right? There are campaign finance laws and rules that a matter of fact, Donald Trump was prosecuted criminally for allegedly violating these so-called laws, these campaign finance laws, these FTC rules pertaining to having a campaign and finance. Well, they hammered Donald Trump, as you are well aware, and it was only yesterday that they signed an order to dismiss it for right now. Well, guess who else had their hand in the kitty? You guessed it, my buddy Al Sharpton, Mr. Two-Face. He tries to act like he's Mr. Righteous. He's Mr. Holier than thou. He knows right. He knows wrong. He was a very, very fervent supporter of Kamala Harris for president. And no wonder why he was, ladies and gentlemen. According to MSNBC, well, they say they were unaware of this. Again, this is another article published online at Fox News. It says MSNBC was unaware, and that's in quotes, Harris campaign gave $500,000, $500,000 to Al Sharpton's group ahead of a friendly interview. Harris campaign gave $250,000 donation to Sharpton's nonprofit. It's kind of like Oprah. They don't tell us on the front end. And I know this for a fact, the campaign finance rules require them to state where certain things are coming from. It depends on the context, depends on if it's a commercial. I know this firsthand. There are lawyers pouring all over what has transpired because there might be some actual criminal activity on the part of all these people involved. I'm not saying there is. I want to be clear. I'm saying it looks bad. It smells bad. It just seems bad. All these people come out with these endorsements publicly on the public airwaves, and yet they never disclose that they were effectively de facto compensated for these endorsements. And if they weren't compensated for the endorsements, it sure looks like they were compensated for these endorsements. You guys agree with me on that? Put in the comments if you don't mind. I'll take a look at it in a second. To me, it just looks wrong. It smells like there's some type of malfeasance going on. I don't really see another way to look at it. So you have Brother Al. He never disclosed this. And listen, technically, it went to his nonprofit. It's not difficult to put it in your pocket. It can still be your nonprofit, and you can legally and legitimately have that money flow back into your pocket, for example, in the way of some kind of consulting agreement or just some type of whatever business expense he wishes to cause. If he can call it whatever. If he controls the LLC, the corporation, if he controls the nonprofit, whatever the business structure is, to funnel this money into his pocket, the result is the same thing. He is de facto paid $500,000. $500,000. I would imagine that would sway a lot of people, a lot of people to want to go ahead and support a particular candidate. But, and yeah, Yay God agrees 100%. I think that's exactly what transpired. It's easy for us all to see before our eyes. And listen, I'm just, in full disclosure, I want to be straight up about this. It would take more than $500,000 for me to support Kamala Harris. I'm just saying. Now you get around that million mark, all bets are off. I can't tell you in good conscience that I'd say that I couldn't be on TV right here telling you that we need to vote, as Oprah Winfrey said, for Kamala Harris. I know that was a terrible impression. I'm sorry. Okay, let's take a quick read through this and we'll take a peek at it. MSNBC admitted it was unaware that Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign paid $500,000 to Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network nonprofit ahead of a friendly interview with the Democratic nominee ahead of Election Day. Harris sat down for a friendly interview on October 20th with MSNBC's Sharpton. Remember, folks, he has a program on MSNBC. I forgot the exact name of it, but he hosts his own program, and to my knowledge, he continues to do so. It says MSNBC's Sharpton, an open supporter of Harris and the Democratic Party, following Harris's loss to President-elect Trump via, they found this out through these FEC filings. Remember, they are required by law to track and report all the money coming in and all the money coming out of a campaign. But at any rate, these filings, they went through these filings and they revealed the Harris campaign gave two $250,000 donations, which is $500,000, i.e. $500,000, to Sharpton's nonprofit organization in September and October. But the MSNBC host did not inform viewers of the contributions or the conflict of interest before or after the interview. Isn't it interesting how they are constantly hammering President Donald Trump-elect and his cabinet and his supporters all the time for having a conflict of interest or a conflict, appearance of a conflict? It's just interesting to me, ladies and gentlemen, how they have two different standards. If you were a woke Democrat, there's one standard. And of course, if you were a Donald Trump supporter, there's a different standard right there. So MSNBC was unaware of the donations made to the National Action Network, and MSNBC spokesperson told the Washington Free Beacon, which first broke this story. I just heard about this story today, and when I saw it, I'm like, I've got to tell my peeps. They're not going to believe this. Well, I take that back. We all believe this. We should not be surprised by any of these tactics. Democrats, these woke Democrats especially, always say one thing and do another thing. We all are very clear aware of this. The Free Beacon added, and by the way, here is this friendly interview in this picture. If you can see this picture on your screen, you have Al Sharpton giving the friendly interview to Kamala Harris, a.k.a. one-on-one with Rev in final days of campaign. The Free Beacon added that Sharpton did not inform network brass that his nonprofit received money from the Harris campaign. MSNBC declined to say if Sharpton would face consequences. According to the report, MSNBC did not respond to multiple requests for additional comment from Fox News Digital. Sharpton appeared in MSNBC as recent as Monday on Morning Joe. Not only did he do that, I know the morning of, the day after the election, 6 o'clock a.m., he was sitting there talking to Morning Joe, and they were all just kind of holding their face in shock. And the Reverend had a few choice words for Donald Trump and Donald Trump supporters, which we talked about on this program. Harris sat down for a friendly interview last month on MSNBC's Politics Nation, which happened to fall on the same day as her 60th birthday. Well, happy belated birthday, Kamala Harris. Today is your birthday. and we all reflect on our birthdays, what our life would mean. You called me on my birthday. Thanks again. It's kind of funny to read through. What do you want 50 years from now in history to say about Kamala Harris? Sharpton asked. And she goes on to say, I hope that, and I really do work that my life would have proven to have been a life that is about fighting for the people, fighting for the dignity of the people, Harris said. Some little girl, little boy is going to be talking about you like you talked about Mrs. Shirley Chisholm, Sharpton commented, comparing Harris to the first black woman elected to Congress who also made a presidential run in 1972. You know, as a side note, sometimes when I'm reading these articles and I have to read through a comment by Kamala Harris, her word salads can easily turn out to be a tongue twister, if you know what I'm saying. She is definitely the queen of saying something and saying absolutely nothing. The Free Beacon also noticed that the Society of Professional Journalists called the move a black eye for both MSNBC and journalism. Reporter Chuck Ross posted on X that MSNBC ignoring inquiries related to the story until the Society of Professional Journalists spoke out. It's been a difficult few weeks for MSNBC as liberal viewers have fled the network since Trump's victory over Harris on Election Day. Since the election, MSNBC is down 42% among total day viewers and down 52% during prime time compared to its 2024 averages. You know, I've heard they've been down as much as 60%. And that there's talk, and I'm sure you all have heard this by now, that Elon Musk might step in and buy MSNBC or buy some these other companies that are looking to effectively distance themselves from these liberal networks such as ABC, and there's a few other rumors floating around out there. I just think it's interesting to consider. And when you seen Morning Joe and his wife Mika, they were joking just the other day that a year from now we may not have a job. That might be a real possibility. They literally shot themselves in the foot. Well, they shot themselves in a few other places too, but I digress. It says that, to say it's been a difficult week for MSNBC, I would say the last 2 to 3 weeks has been extremely difficult for the whole network, and they deserve it. I don't really feel sorry for them at all. And we're going to conclude this article. Sharpton was the only media ally that received a payment from the campaign to his organization ahead of their sit-down interviews, a recent New York Times report revealed. But remember, folks, Kamala Harris's campaign, to the best of our knowledge, so far, she has given money to Eminem, given money to Oprah. And I'm not talking a little money. I'm talking a lot of money. I think Eminem received 1.2, 1.5 million. As the filings come out for the FEC, we're going to be talking about this very subject because I have a feeling that a large chunk of the people who came out publicly to endorse Kamala Harris did so because they were paid, or at least it sure looks like that. If you remember, Kamala Harris would have to have individuals such as Beyonce, and I don't have any knowledge of her receiving money, although I think that someone has said that she has, but I'll verify that. They could not get people to come to a Kamala Harris rally unless they did two things. They had to bus people in, or apparently they had to have someone like Beyonce to be there. And you know what, folks? The whole campaign of Kamala Harris has been a fraud. The whole campaign. It was a fraudulent coup that kicked Joe Biden out and put Kamala Harris in. Fraud to begin with, fraud during the entire campaign, and now we're seeing the fraud afterwards. We shouldn't be surprised that you put fraud in, you get fraud out. She would bring Beyonce and a whole different list of performers, especially the one where she accepted the nomination at the end of the DNC's actual big party that they had. It's shocking that they had to put a rumor out that Beyonce was going to be there just to get people to tune in. And then that subsequent rally that they had in Houston, again, Beyonce is going to be there. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody was excited. And this time she was there, but she didn't perform. Talk about bait and switch, right? Pretty nasty. All right. And in conclusion, the campaign also gave a $350,000 payment to New Vision Media on September 9th, according to FEC filings, First reported by the Times, New Vision Media is a media company run by the progressive journalist Roland Martin. Martin, a Harris supporter, interviewed her on his own program in October. And folks, if you remember, what was that? The Call Her Daddy podcast. She paid $100,000 for that wood little platform or that background structure that they had. If you're interested, just Google the Call Your Daddy or Call Her Daddy, whatever it was, podcast, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But that was $100,000. You could have had a handyman build that thing for a couple of grand, maybe $5,000 tops. I don't know. It's been a while since I've bought lumber, but it's just an outrageous amount of money that they have just, in my opinion, squandered. Can you imagine spending $1 billion in 100 and some days? They made a movie about that not too long ago. Well, actually, it was a long time ago. You remember that movie? I think it was called Brewster's Millions, where, what was that? That was Richard Pryor. I love that movie. That was a great movie. Lots of fun. Funny movie. He had to spend $10 million or something like that. And there was a few rules on what he could spend. He couldn't just give it away. For example, at least Kamala Harris could literally just give it away. But in this particular case, he had to spend that money, have no assets as a result of spending the money within 30 days, 60 days, whatever it was. So it's kind of like that. I mean, you have to work at losing that type of money. That's just insane. Let me check the comments out before we switch to the next chapter that we're going to hit. Okay, we're going to take a peek at the comments. But I think we all dodged a bullet, if you know what I'm saying. The fact that she can spend that type of money and not give it a second thought is kind of scary. Can you imagine what she would have done in the next 4 years to this nation? And not just in the sense of war, in the sense of ruining our economy. How about just running up the deficit that's already out of control? That would be sad. So let's take a quick peek at the comments here. Again, everybody, thank you for being here. All right, yeah, God, trying to raise money to pay the staff. And I feel sorry, yeah, God, for those people that actually worked legitimately on her campaign. I mean, these were people that were paid to do a job, and they have not been paid. There's been a lot of them that's been laid off, no severance, no nothing. I don't really care as much for the severance, but they need to be compensated for the work that they actually did. I mean, these people are probably working people like the most of us. They have bills that come in, they work, they need to pay their bills. But there's people out there right now that have bills that came in that they can't pay because they didn't get paid from their work. And so first, according to Trish Reagan, Elon is like, yeah, I've heard that too. There's an offer for ABC. My theory on this, by the way, is that, and at least in part, what you have going on here, Sapphire, is you have a situation to where you have the Trump administration coming in. They have that very tough FCC head that they've installed in that position right there. And I would say that if I was ABC, NBC, CNN, any of these news companies, so to speak, that have been, especially The View. Look at The View and some of these other places. All right. There's a reason they're given all these legal notes, and they're being very careful with what they say. They know this FCC chairman is going to find a way to make the case that these people should be penalized heavily because they've been violating the rules, even though these are independent companies. For example, like ABC, they're an independent company. They can do what they want to do, but they use the public airways, and to use the public airways is not a right. It's a privilege. And the federal government, for example, has something called the equal time provision. So effectively, if you give one candidate during an election 5 minutes, you are supposed to give the other candidate 5 minutes. And of course, with Donald Trump, they did not do that. Remember that one night where Kamala Harris was invited to Saturday Night Live, but Donald Trump did not receive the same invitation? So, I'm not the kind of person who wants to sit around and tell you how unfair everything is. That's not what I'm about. Life is tough. It's unfair. Deal with it. But when you're using the public airways, and when you're violating the law, and when you are lying to people out there, and you're not giving them both sides of the equation like you're supposed to do under law, yeah, I have a problem with that. And that needs That needs to be taken care of. And I like Trish too. I've seen her program once or twice. I agree with the comments coming in. Yes. Let's see. Yeah, and you're right, Nana, American Nana. The performers generally perform for free. I know Donald Trump. I have not heard anything about Hulk Hogan being paid to come out and support Donald Trump. There was a whole. How about Lee Greenwood? I mean, he actually went with Donald Trump to different venues as he was out on the campaign trail. Now, in full disclosure, I'm certain that Lee Greenwood has been rewarded handsomely financially because he's going to get a lot of residual record sales because people like that song, this type of stuff. But I'm just saying that the other people that were there, to my knowledge, I have not heard of any type of payment to them. And if they were paid, I can assure you they were not paid $1 million like Oprah Winfrey was de facto through her network. So it's pretty sad. Okay, yay God. Hello everybody. I'm glad we have such a healthy chat on this conference on this channel here. It's good. It's good for each and every one of us here. And let's see. One has a New Jersey and bust the pitbull. Yeah. All right, looks good. I'm just looking to see if I see any actual questions here. Sapphire said Trump called her and offered her $20 million to pay her staff. Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. I thought that was just a joke. It's horrible. Yeah, God, it's horrible. Labor laws would go after a business owner for not paying staff. She gets a pass. Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. Yeah, God. I can add to that too. That well, I think you pointed it out that if it would have been anybody except Kamala Harris and her campaign staff, that would be criminal. It wouldn't be just a matter of going after them. That would be a criminal offense to hire somebody and not pay them. You spent too much money and you didn't allocate enough money to pay them. That would be something that I know for a fact local prosecutors would be very happy to take a very stern look at and to bring about appropriate charges as they are warranted. So, yes. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing here. Now, this is kind of keeping with the Harris campaign here because there's one other little tidbit right here. They had one, let's see, the Harris campaign. Yeah, they have 2 or 3 different articles out right now about the fact they are perturbed. I think that's the easy way to put it. Over this whole situation. You even had, was that Elon Omar, I think's how you say your name. She came out complaining against the way that Harris has ran her campaign. But briefly, I want to touch on this. This is another article, Fox News Digital. Harris campaign chair fumes about narratives. She was afraid to do interviews. Remember, she would not even get out and do interviews. How many times have you all seen recently on TV too, where they're like, oh, they're trying to dissect and figure out exactly what happened with this campaign and why it was not successful. Ladies and gentlemen, how about this? Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate, and the American people did not want to have a socialist United States of America. The American people did not support what she stood for. The American people could see she was lying to our faces. She would say in 2019, I am definitely for fracking. And then she wants you to believe that somehow, some way she's had an epiphany and, hey, fracking's a good thing. We need to keep it. I mean, come on. We're not fools. I think that's very clear. It goes on here. Kamala Harris campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon said during an interview Tuesday that the media's criticism over the vice president not doing enough interviews in the early days of her campaign was completely bulls. I do not think a narrative 107 days, 2 weeks, talking about how she didn't do interviews, which you know she was doing plenty. What? But we were doing in our way. I guess you're saying we were doing it our way. We had to be the nominee. We had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that what she forgets to tell you, she inherited a campaign. She literally just slipped herself into what Joe Biden already had set up with his 100 million, 200 million campaign chest. So, yeah, it may have been 107 days, but she agreed to assume that role, and she had all these other benefits going forward, no matter how they tried to minimize. But she says we had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that you kind of want to factor in, but real people heard in some way that we were not doing to have interviews, which was both not true and also so counter to any kind of standard that was put on Trump. What? She's trying to say Trump was treated more favorably. Are you kidding me? And this is almost hilarious. That I think that was a problem, Dylan told Pod Save America, hosted by Dan Pfeiffer, noting that she was not a media hater. Are you kidding me? Dylan and top Harris campaign officials, and they list their names out here. They're on this podcast, Pod Save America, for their first interviews since President-elect Donald Trump's decisive victory 3 weeks ago. After President Trump dropped out of the race on July 21st, he quickly endorsed Harris as the replacement on the ticket. What it should say here is after President Trump was dethroned in a coup d'etat, Harris got the nomination July 22nd. When, of course, Biden was replaced on the ticket, Harris did not set for her first interview, which was held alongside her running mate. Remember, she needed her governor supporter to be there for an interview that she's supposed to give to the mainstream media for the first time, August 29th, which was 39 days after the president's announcement. Listen, I don't want to hear this. You know, the women are treated different than men. This identity politics just drives me up the wall. The fact of the matter is she was not confident enough to get out there and give interviews. And I have to say this, to her credit, it worked for Joe Biden from back in 2020. Remember, he had the strategy of staying in his basement. He was going to hide out in his basement, and that's what he did, folks. He stayed in his basement, and somehow he still won. Although it was a very narrow victory, he still won. So in her mind, that's probably what she was thinking. She was thinking, well, it worked for my boss, Joe. Why shouldn't it work for me? Again, just speculation on my part, but that's exactly what I think. That's what I think happened. And of course, Donald Trump once again proved that politics are different now in 2024. By the way, I think 2020 was just what you call a statistical anomaly. You had COVID, if y'all remember, back in 2020, running rampant. Everybody was scared. These people were scaring the bejesus out of each and every one of us. I knew then that it had to be overhyped, but at the same time, I wasn't 100% sure. I did notice, and I was very upset about the way they were taking our rights away from each and every one of us. Remember that lady that is now a senator, a state senator in the state of Texas, that she was put in jail by the judge who was mad. She had the gall to open her salon during a COVID. She said, I had to feed my family and keep my employees with some money coming in. And then at the same time, remember Nancy Pelosi, sweet Nancy Pelosi, they caught her on film, on video tape, whatever they call it nowadays. They actually had a video of her getting her hair done with her favorite salon personnel, even though this young lady in Texas, the judge was all over her. The judge was like, you're selfish. You're only thinking of yourself. You might have killed people by being out and around and spreading this terrible disease. Unconscionable. It goes on here. She also argued that when Harris did an interview, the questions were small and processy. As Cutter added the questions were dumb. She said that the questions Harris got were not informing a voter who was trying to learn more about her. Folks, the way I remember the interviews, the ones that she gave, the very few she gave, a lot of them were setups. She was given the questions ahead of time on the radio. Remember that one where that lady got fired for bringing that to all of our attention, effectively being a whistleblower about that particular situation. Additionally, that I got two words for you. How about 60 Minutes, right? 60 Minutes. They literally changed the answer. They edited it in such a way to where it looked like she gave a more intelligent answer than she did. These people give me a never-ending line of stuff to talk about. I mean, they still believe their own, I don't know. These people still, I think if you say something, folks, enough and you keep repeating it and you keep repeating it, I think at some point you might be likely to believe your own lies, your own nonsense, your own spin. And I think that that's what happens a lot of times. I think these people keep hearing it repeated, repeated, repeated. And one other thing, too, about Kamala Harris losing the election, could it also be that her first decision, her big decision, the very first one that she made was not a decision that I would have made, and you probably wouldn't have made it either. But this is one way you can judge these candidates. She had to choose a VP running mate. Now, as we talked about on this program, she had to win all three of the blue wall states, which includes the great state of Pennsylvania. And of course, the governor there, that Josh Shapiro, who is also Jewish, by the way, which will help her with Jewish voters. This guy, governor, very popular governor of Pennsylvania, and she did not choose him. She chose that nutty tampon Tim from Minnesota. Ladies and gentlemen, Minnesota has been voting Democrat for a very long time. I do not know the last time that the state of Minnesota voted for a Republican. I do know this. I know it goes back all the way at least to the 60s. And the reason I know this is even the great Ronald Reagan, in his reelection victory in 1984, he was not able to win the state of Minnesota. Ronald Reagan won every other state in his landslide victory over Walter Mondale, but he did not win the state of Minnesota. So what would be the reason to choose Tampon Tim? Your guess is as good as mine. If she would have went with Shapiro, at least it would have been a better choice. In the history books, it would have made more sense. I don't know if it would have resulted in a victory in Pennsylvania, but I will say this, it would have been a much better, much more informed, proper choice. It would have shown that she has good decision-making skills, because that is definitely who I would have chosen. Not only that, let's just be straight up and honest about it. She's claiming she's a black woman. She's a minority. Well, balance the ticket out and put a white guy on there, I guess, right? I mean, to me, it just sounds more rational. Again, I hate these identity politics. I hate this race nonsense. Sometimes it drives me up the wall. But it is what it is. Politics is a dirty game, and this is how people think. I do not agree with Josh Shapiro. I'm definitely not a supporter of Josh Shapiro. I can promise you that. But that man can talk. That man has charisma. That man knows how to appropriately convey a point. I don't agree with his points, but right? He's able to swipe back with his rebuttals and stuff like that. He's a good debater is probably the best way to say it. Let me check, see if I missed any comments. But do you all agree with me on that? Do you guys think Josh Shapiro is a good communicator? I mean, that he would have been the better choice over Tim Walz, or do you think there's a specific reason that she chose him? I'm curious if y'all care to comment what that would be. All right, got everybody's comment here. Thank you, folks. Yay, God, thank you. My buddy Sapphire. See, oh yeah, I remember we talked about your cousin, Billy Morgan, Blue Dog Democrat, and said Kamala is the worst. Yeah, I think she has to be the worst candidate in some time. I mean, you're right. The caucus looked a lot more coherent, a lot more stronger than she did. That's for sure. And if you remember the caucus, one of the many problems he had is this guy didn't get out and work it like Donald Trump did. He kind of did what Kamala Harris did, but actually he worked harder than Kamala Harris, but his problem was he went back to Massachusetts, which he was the current governor of Massachusetts, and what he would do is he was conducting the business of the state. Don't get me wrong, that's his job, but he has seconds that he could pass that off to during the election phase so that he could give it everything he got. But he did not make that choice, and of course he paid for it, and he lost 1988, of course, to George H.W. Bush. So that's a good point there, Sapphire. I think that's right on spot. American Nana, Dukakis and Romney were governor's master. Yep. Yeah, I definitely do not like Romney. He is I'm not really a lover of the word rhino, but he is definitely a rhino. And, more important to that, I think what it is with Romney, American, and I think Romney, it's not so much he's a rhino. I think if I'm being accurate about it, I would say he's got a serious case of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. He's been that way a long time. I mean, he's told us who he is. Remember, to my memory, he was one of the first never Trumpers. Remember that stuff going on? Never Trumpers. He actually flew out from Colorado and went to Washington, D.C. to give this speech. I remember that years ago. It was supposed to be a real important speech of why the Republican Party could not go ahead and go down the path Donald Trump wanted us to go down. That's just the way it was. I remember that clearly. And he's never kind of backed off that. They've kind of tried to shake hands and make nice in front of the cameras, but secretly, these two do not like each other, Donald Trump and Mitt Romney. And I would say more of it's on Mitt Romney's side. He just has always been a never Trumper, and that's not going to change, my friends. American Anna, I heard, I have to be careful using that word right there, sweetheart. I told you I got in trouble. I did not get technically a strike, but YouTube is not the home of free speech. It's not an Elon Musk. I can talk about that more on the X platform. And remember, as I've told y'all, I'm in the process of coming up with a group for us where we can have some more direct conversations, and I can get into the weeds on some of these other topics that I would like to be able to more openly talk about. But yes, your point's well taken. Yeah, God, better choice. But she would have still lost. I totally agree with you. Yeah, God, it would have been a better choice. That I 100% agree. But it probably wouldn't have mattered, right? I want to quickly touch on this. You have this Ilhan Omar blasting the Harris-Walz campaign for courting sweet Liz Cheney, a huge misstep. This is another article, Fox News Digital. It goes on to say, you have the one name for my generation and generations younger than me that is synonymous with war. This is what Ilhan Omar said. All right, we're just going to hit the top highlights. It says controversial squad member, this representative out of Minnesota, Olan Emar, or whatever her name is, has explained where she thinks the Democratic presidential ticket of Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota went wrong. According to Omar, the campaign's choice to embrace the endorsements of former Republican Liz Cheney and her father, VP Dick Cheney, was a huge misstep. This was especially true in the battleground state of Michigan, she told the Minnesota Tribune, because it was where the uncommitted movement maintained a stronghold. The uncommitted movement specifically withheld support from President Joe Biden and Harris because of its disapproval of their handling of the war in Gaza. Particularly, a large population of Arabs and Muslims in Michigan believe the U.S. was not holding Israel accountable for the death and destruction in Gaza. I will say this. I do not like Liz Cheney. And this Omar is right about one thing. There is a huge Muslim population, statistically speaking, in Michigan. And as a matter of fact, there is a large population of Muslims in Illinois. And the cool thing is, Donald Trump, if you remember, he not only got the support of the Jewish community, he also was endorsed by the Muslim community there in Michigan. Isn't that quite a feat? There was several representatives that came out and supported Donald Trump for president openly. I'm just guessing because I was trying to think, how do you reconcile that? I think what they could see is what we all could see. Donald Trump would be the leader most likely to get in there and put a stop to all these wars. Jewish people do not want Jews to die. They don't want their country to be under attack. And of course, the Muslims don't want to see Gaza destroyed. And they don't want to see the Hezbollah over there in Lebanon, the southern Lebanon situation, for them to be destroyed. So I don't know. That kind of justifies it in my mind. But Liz Cheney, what can I say about sweet Liz Cheney? It is one of these things that just kind of boggles the mind. Remember, she was number 3 in the Republican Party. And then, of course, she came out strongly against Donald Trump. And she forgets the basics, ladies and gentlemen, about politics. The basics are you need to leave your hubris back in the state of Wyoming. You were there to represent the voters of Wyoming. Liz, that was your sole job, to represent the voters of Wyoming, not to impose your beliefs and your will on the voters, but to support the voters there in Wyoming. And you lost your way. You went off this deep end. Can you imagine Liz Cheney supporting Kamala Harris? They had a video clip of her not long ago, ladies and gentlemen, showing just what she thought of Kamala Harris back from 2020. And she didn't hold nothing back. And then all of a sudden now she wants us all to believe that Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to democracy. And she's doing a noble cause. I'm being noble. I'm here for God and country. And we have to stop this terrible menace, a.k.a. Donald Trump. No one believed that. Everybody knows exactly what happened. She turned her back on America. She turned her back on Wyoming. She turned her back on Donald Trump. She was primaried because the Republicans rule the great state of Wyoming. And as a result, she was defeated in the primary. De facto, that means she's going to lose. She's not going to win her seat back. And of course, the Republican that ran against her ended up being the new representative from the great state of Wyoming. I mean, this is not rocket science, but Liz Cheney lost her way. She thought in her hubris that she knows best, right? Well, how'd that work out for you, Liz? Just can't stand her. And you can blame her for the election loss as far as Kamala Harris and her team goes. I will say it was definitely a split screen moment where you have Donald Trump out working every day, sometimes 2 or 3 rallies a day, going out and meeting voters, getting shot in the head, going to McDonald's and putting on the apron and trying to connect with voters. My favorite moment has to be the garbage truck, when Joe Biden called the all of us garbage. Anybody that supports Trump is garbage. That's pretty well what he said. And I love that moment where Donald Trump crawls up in that truck and he's hanging out the side. It's kind of like this, and he's like, "How do you like my truck?" I just loved it. I just thought that was perfect. I mean, that just shows what Donald Trump is. I don't want to get too carried away with this, but Donald Trump is going to be another Ronald Reagan, but probably even greater in the history books. I firmly believe this. There's no doubt in my mind that's exactly what's going to happen. Donald Trump is truly the one in a generation, probably once a century when you get right down to it. I mean, this is a rare thing. You get a man or woman that has this type of charisma, that is able to communicate with the American people the way he does, and just has a basic understanding of common sense. And he's able to communicate that to everyone. Even a guy like me, trust me on this, I'm not no follower of anybody other than Jesus Christ. I can assure you of that, ladies and gentlemen. But even me, I didn't like this man back in 2016. I didn't vote for him. I'm embarrassed to say I voted for Hillary Clinton. Now, it didn't take me long to change my mind quickly and to see the error of my ways. I voted for Trump, of course, in 2020 and in 2024. But at first, I just didn't have that right feel about him, if you will. It just wasn't the person I thought he turned out to be. Now, quickly, he proved himself to me when he became the president, and I did a complete 180 on that situation. But my point is, he is a very rare and amazing individual, and I think he's going to do great things for our country. There is no such thing, obviously, as a perfect man, perfect woman, but I firmly believe that he is a person that has the special anointing of God to rise up at a time like this. That's what the Bible says. Sometimes a person is made for a time like this. And I think in our country, he has been brought to power for a time such as this. Just my fervent belief, and we'll see how it turns out. But I feel in my heart confident, hopeful, happy, rejuvenated, excited. Fill in the adjective that you want to put in there. It is just a great feeling, and it just gives me not just a sense of pride, but that hope. And it's not the hope for me. We're all going to be dead soon. Listen, I don't plan on dying anytime soon, but I know the days are getting shorter, right? We all know where we're going. But I'm worried for my children, for my grandchildren, for their children. and I feel good seeing this change that is coming right now. And I'm sure y'all probably share sentiments like that. It's just the way I feel, and we'll have to see exactly how this all turns out. But as I say oftentimes, we want to make sure that we rise President Donald Trump elect up in our prayers and make sure that we pray for him and his family, even though he is a strong president and he's a strong man overall. I mean, look at him, 78 years old, and he's able to carry out the schedule that he was carrying out. I remember Kamala Harris talking about how this man's exhausted, this man's confused, this man's this or that. And yet you had Kamala Harris on video all the time, yawning, looking extremely tired. She would do one event and then it required her to take off the very next day. Kind of like her vacation right now over in Hawaii. She's been on vacation. If you didn't know that, she's on her way back to Washington now. If she hasn't already arrived, but she's been taking it easy down in Hawaii because she has worked so hard and so tirelessly. She was just exhausted. Donald Trump at 78 years old, I don't think there's many people that could keep up with him like that. He was doing 2-3 times a day doing events the way he was as far as his campaign rallies go. That is a strong person, man, woman, what otherwise. I mean, he's, this way. There's one quick note too on the Hillary Clinton thing. Remember, the Democratic Party was a different Democratic Party. The party of JFK is not the Democratic Party of today. The Democratic Party of Bill Clinton is not the Democratic Party of today. And I would argue even Hillary Clinton. The Hillary Clinton I voted for in 2016 was the Hillary Clinton of 2015. Of 1995. She was the Democrat of that time, similar to her husband. I mean, let's be honest about Bill Clinton. In my book, he was rather conservative, what we call those blue dog Democrats. Now, Hillary Clinton, kind of like Al Gore, in my estimation, there's something about it when you get that close to winning an election, to being president of the United States, being famous, having all that power, and you walk up and you just fall short. In Kamala Harris' case, she really fell short, but you fall short of the prize. Look what happened to Al Gore after his loss in 2000. I mean, he really went off the deep end. And again, I voted for Al Gore because I liked Bill Clinton so much. I'm truly the independent voter, ladies and gentlemen. I voted for Democrats and I voted for Republicans. There's no doubt at this stage of my life, I definitely have gotten somewhat more conservative in my views, but there's some views I have that would probably be considered liberal, and that's okay. On this channel, I welcome all points of view so we can have an open and frank discussion about them. But I am all about freedom, making our own choices, earning things on merit. I don't want people living on charity. I want people to have a chance to get the American dream. You have someone like Kamala Harris, they were all about, it's not just equality under the law. They wanted everything to be what they called equitable. And that is a scary, scary situation. So, all right, let's keep moving on. One good thing about Donald Trump today in the news, this according to Newsweek. Obviously, Donald Trump, one of his main campaign things is he wants to fix the border, thank God, and he's going to start a very large program where they're going to start deporting a lot of the people in our country who's here illegally and not just go after, just everybody, at least at first. What he wants to do is they want to focus on bad actors, criminals, this type of element, right? Well, how's he going to do that? That's a lot of people, ladies and gentlemen, to move in that short period of time. Well, according to Newsweek, Donald Trump's team eyes using state and local police for immigration enforcement. President-elect Donald Trump's immigration advisors are discussing plans to enlist local law enforcement officers to help the federal government deport undocumented immigrants, according to sources familiar with the matter. The Trump transition team has also begun discussions about having the Department of Homeland Security work with state and local police forces to fast track the deportation of undocumented immigrants living in the country. People working with the transition team and others familiar with the plan told Newsweek. The effort is to focus on implementing Trump's campaign pledge to, quote unquote, deputize which of course the president can do. He can basically, you're federalizing the troops. So deputize state and local law enforcement to help carry out mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. Doing so requires the Department of Homeland Security to enter into formal agreements with local law enforcement agencies through a program known as the 287G that was established by a 1996 immigration law. I think he has an option to, instead of just doing this particular angle on this 287G, he might be able to actually federalize the police officer. I know he can do that with the National Guard, but that's one of the many options that he has in his arsenal, so to speak. What do you think about that? I think that's kind of common sense. I'm surprised that it's just being discussed for the first time. But it's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take a huge effort. If you do the math, and it's going to depend on how many planes they got. Let's say, for example, each plane, I don't know how many people you can fit on a plane, but let's say your average 737, what would that be? 100, 120? Anybody know how many people fit on a 737? Well, let's just say 100 for simple math. You have 100 people on there and you start flying them off, and you can mathematically figure out how many people they could deport in the next 4 years. I think that is I think that's an interesting way to look at it and to dissect it, to kind of get an idea of what kind of effort, what kind of resources are going to be needed to implement the plans that Donald Trump has. Okay. All right. Any questions? I want to switch to a couple other subjects real quick here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, you gotta like your comment here on the. It is interesting to watch the libs doing the blame. Shows us their weakness and inability to be accountable for failing. Yeah, not just accountable for failing, but accountable for lying, accountable for not just lying, but they've been what's the new word? Gaslighting everybody, and telling you effectively, you cannot believe your lying eyes, because what you see in front of you is not the reality on the ground. And we all know that's a bunch of nonsense. And I'm so proud of the American people in general right now to be able to see through all that nonsense. I really am. It is kind of scary how close the election was per se, but I will tell you straight up, I'm very happy. I'm always proud to be an American, but let's be honest about it. It's much easier to be proud when you see things going the way you want it to go, when you see things being solved, when you see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? All right, we're switching gears hard. Okay, here we go. We're going to talk briefly about the Menendez brothers case update. Now, we're all generally familiar with the two brothers all the way out in California that killed their parents. Let's listen to this quick clip and then let's talk about it. I'm curious, if you don't mind, in the chat, just simply tell me, should they be freed or jail? Just type free or type jail. Let's take a quick informal survey and see what you guys think should happen to the Menendez brother. And I got a couple comments we'll talk about on the other side.
Hey there, I'm Brooke Thomas with a quick update in the Menendez brothers' efforts to be released from prison. A big question was answered in a short court hearing today. No, Lyle and Eric will not be home for Thanksgiving. They will not be home for Christmas, because today a judge decided to push back an upcoming hearing, a hearing in their efforts to be resentenced. The hearing was supposed to be at the beginning of December, but now the judge has decided this hearing will be January 30th and 31st, if necessary, of 2025. The judge wants to give the newly elected LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman more time to review the case. And the judge also admitting that he himself would like a little more time to review the recommendation from current DA George Gascon. The two brothers, they were not in court in person. They did appear virtually from the prison they are serving time in San Diego. If you would like more information.
Okay, so let's talk about it for a second here. So basically what you had here, at least the way I see this particular case, is you have these two brothers, and by all accounts, they have been doing exactly what they should have been doing as far as being model prisoners. They have been helping other prisoners. They have been teaching people, I believe, to read, helping people with counseling. I don't have a list of all the things that they have done, but they have definitely turn their lives around and have tried to make prison a better place, if there's such a thing, even though they have had no hope of being sprung. I mean, it's really incredible to imagine spending the rest of your entire life in prison. But clearly that's what they're facing. And listen, I'm not minimizing this when I make these comments, and then I'll take a look at how y'all answered this. But I want you to remember this. These guys here, on one hand, they killed their mom and their dad. I mean, that's terrible, especially their mother, even if their father had committed, and I want to use gentle words here because, again, it's YouTube. The dad definitely abused the boys. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think anybody really believes that did not happen. Now, the mother, that's a little bit harder of a story to explain as to why they killed their mother. There's questions as to whether or not she knew about the abuse one way or the other. Well, here's the deal, and then we'll take a look at it. The reason I think it's probably worth a chance for them to go free, or at least on some type of monitored supervision or something like that, is for the following reasons. And then you can tell me if you agree or disagree with it. All right. First, remember, the brothers had 2 trials. In the first trial, they were allowed to admit evidence of what they are alleging about the abuse that basically made them do what they did. The jury was able to consider that evidence. And as a result of that, that was truly a hung jury. There was something like 5 or 6 in favor of conviction, 5 or 6 in favor of manslaughter. They were offered what's called a lesser inclusive. Instead of just straight up murder with no chance of parole, they were able to choose to have the lesser charge of manslaughter. The thing is, manslaughter would have only been like 10, maybe 12 years most, if it was like a manslaughter or involuntary manslaughter, basically a crime of passion, if you will. So it depends on the state and it depends on the label, but that's kind of how it came down. Well, because it was a hung jury, they got a do-over. The prosecution got a do-over. And I don't want to get off on this tangent, but I think that's unfair about the American criminal justice system. I don't think it should be like that. I don't think the prosecutor should get a second swing at it. You either prove your case or don't prove your case. Before you take away the freedom of an individual, you better think long and hard about it. And listen, I'm a pro-justice guy. I'm a pro-police guy. You'll never see me defund the police. You'll never see me doing anything of the sort. However, it is important to understand our justice system, and where it is failing, we need to identify these failures and correct it. All right. So their very first trial, that's how it ended. It was split. Well, statistically speaking, when a prosecution occurs for the second time against any defendant, the prosecution generally prevails 98+% of the time. So just imagine that. In addition to that, the judge would not allow the brothers to bring the evidence that they brought in the first case about the abuse for the jury to consider. They were simply barred from being able to put up a defense. Can you imagine? You're on trial for your very life and you're not able to put on your defense? What is that about? The world has changed since then. Well, of course, we're familiar with the Me Too stuff, and I have a lot of opinions about that, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. At that point, I remember this myself. I remember when they were making these allegations, I remember the prosecutor saying men cannot be abused like that. It just simply can't happen. That was the mentality of the prosecutors back in 1994, 5, 6, whenever this particular second trial took place. So we know that they were convicted. And my problem I have is the following. How can you put someone in jail for the rest of their life when they had a trial that was clearly defective? They need to either be awarded a brand new trial and allow them to introduce the evidence that a woman could have introduced back in 1994, 95, or they need to grant them clemency, or they need to give them some type of parole or resentencing, whatever. That's just my take, and that's the reason for my take, all right? And I agree that reasonable people can differ with this, but I do want to take quickly a look at y'all's comments here, because this is something that reasonable people can reasonably disagree on. All right. I already said free. Sapphire is on the jail side. Yay, God is free. The ones that say free, I'm just curious. Do you, first of all, has my comments convinced anybody to go the other way on this? Or, the people that want them to go free, you agree with my comments I'm making, or is there another reason? I probably want to hear more than anything the other reason why you think they should go free. I'm just curious as to what anybody might be thinking. Sapphire says, or American Anna. Okay, she's questioning Sapphire there. Yeah, I have to admit, the killing the parents and planning it, that is a problem. But what I have a problem with is the fact that they never got to put on the defense that a female could have put on, for example. If you're going to convict somebody, I just think the judge should allow whatever their defense is to come in. Just my opinion. Yeah, God, they aren't a threat. I don't think so either. I totally agree with you on that. I totally agree with you guys on that. All right, let me see if there's any other thing here. Okay, we have American Ann. I understand why you feel that way, and we all have our opinion. Amen on that. And Sapphire, they should have been given a fair trial. I agree with you on that, Sapphire. And American Anna, I know you're responding to Sapphire with your comment there. We all have an opinion. And, again, that's one thing I love about this channel. We don't all have to sing from the same sheet of music. We can have a friendly discussion about the facts in a respectful way. And I appreciate that from each and every one of you, because it is important to understand our court systems. I've been talking about that for a very long time. So, all right, listen, our power hour is over a power hour right now. We're going almost an hour and 20 minutes. I want to go ahead and start landing this plane if I could. Hopefully, everyone this week's going to have a fantastic Thanksgiving. I know a lot of us are on the roads and we're traveling and we're doing all that type of stuff. I'm, Lord willing, I'll be back tomorrow and maybe have one final show. I'm going to be hitting the road myself and go visiting my sisters up in Atlanta. So that's probably what I'll end up doing for the actual holiday. And I'll be back probably Friday or Saturday, something like that. I may or may not be able to broadcast while I'm on the road, but if you go ahead and turn on your notifications, where it says subscribe, turn it on and you should get alerts. And by the way, I've had some of you tell me, hey, my alerts don't work. The reason for that is on YouTube, you have to click where it says subscribe, click it again, and it gives you some options. One says personalize and the other one says all. Make sure you click all for at JR Dukes. That way, you're alerted whenever I go live. If it's personalized or if you have none, check. There's a box that says none. It will not give you the immediate alerts. And that's probably the simplest way to explain it. I know I've had a lot of inquiries about that, so I wanted to kind of put that out there on the table for each and every one of you. But again, I'd like to meet tomorrow if I get an opportunity, because I want us to talk about a few other subjects. And I want to talk about all the gifts we have in our lives. Don't ever forget, despite the problems we may have in our lives, we are all very blessed to live right here in America. The fact that you're able to watch me on a computer or your phone shows just how blessed each and every one of you are. The fact that we have electricity, clean running water, access to medical care, we have a roof over our heads, we have eyes that can see, ears that can hear, we have the measure of health that we each have. We live in this beautiful country called the United States of America, truly the best country that God has ever allowed to grace the world. I mean, it is really a true statement. And I just want to make sure we're all mindful of that. We have so much to be grateful for. And I invite you to always be thinking about that in the back of your mind as you're having a quiet moment and just thinking about stuff, because someone always has it much worse than you. And I can assure you, you are very blessed. Frankly, I consider it a blessing that you take time to sit down and have a chat with me. We are a family here on YouTube, and I appreciate you tuning in and listening to what I have to say. It humbles me each and every day. Furthermore, I pray, and I want to give a blessing each and every one of you that God's special anointing and blessings will be on you, your family, your children, your grandchildren, and all through this next year coming up of 2025. So may God bless each and every one of you. And I thank each and every one of you for joining me today. Again, it is a pleasure. Always like to say, my friends, keep that mind free. Never give up. Until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.